You do not believe that beasts, animals are capable of passion. During the expedition into Upper Egypt in 1798 under General de Balzac, I was a young man soldiering in my first campaign, and I was immediately captured by a tribe of wild Arabs and taken by them deep into the sands of the desert and beyond the cataracts of the Nile. In order to place a sufficient distance between themselves and the French army, these Bedouins made a forced march, only halting when night was upon them, and then not surmising that the notion of flight would occur to their prisoner, surrounded as I was in all sides by the vast empty spaces of northern Africa, they contented themselves with binding my hands, made their nomadic tea, and eventually fell asleep. When I saw that my enemy was no longer watching me, I made use of my teeth to steal a scimitar. I fixed the blade between my knees. I cut the cords which bound my hands. I seized a rifle, a dagger, a sack of dried dates, oats, powder, and shot. And I leapt onto a horse and spurred on vigorously in the direction where I thought to find the French army. Indeed, so impatient was I to see a bivouac again that I pressed on the already tired courser at such speed that at last the poor animal died, leaving me alone in the desert. After walking some long time in the sand, I came upon a cave cut into the side of a small hill, on the summit of which a few date palms laden with fruit shot up into the sky, and I hear a spring bubbling nearby. But despite the reassurance of this unlooked-for manna, a black despair grips me. The melancholy sands, glittering like a blade of steel, spread out as far as the eye can see. The sky is an oriental blaze, a brilliancy which brings only despair, leaving the imagination nothing to desire. And the silence of the desert is awful in its wild and terrible majesty. Infinity, eternity, immensity presses in upon my soul from every side. In my solitude and fatigue, I lose my nerve. I throw my arms around one of the palm trees as if it is the body of a friend, and I weep. At last, I lay down in the cave on a rock of granite, capriciously cut out like a camp bed, and eventually fall asleep without taking any precautions to defend myself. So, in the middle of the night, my sleep is troubled by an extraordinary noise. The deep silence around me allows me to distinguish the alternate accents of a respiration whose savage energy couldn't come from a human creature. Through the shadows, I perceive two faint yellow lights. The vivid brilliance of a starlit night aids me gradually to distinguish a huge animal lying but 2 steps from me across the entrance to the cave. The reflection of the moon descending on the horizon lights up the den, rendering visible and resplendent the spotted skin of a leopard. This lion of Egypt sleeps, face toward me, muzzle smeared with blood. She's had a good dinner. She won't be hungry when she wakes up. I think to shoot her, too close and the gun is not loaded. To stab her with my dagger, but not sure of a single blow doing the job, I resolve to wait and watch. The fur on her belly is of a glistening white. Many small marks like velvets form beautiful bracelets round her feet. Her tail also white, ends in black rings. And the over part of her dress, yellow like unburnished gold, has the characteristic blotches in the form of rosettes which distinguish the leopard from every other feline species. The tranquil and formidable hostess snores in an attitude as graceful as that of a cat lying on a cushion, her blood-stained paws, nervous and well-armed, stretched before her face. A face of a strange Asiatic beauty which rests upon them and from which radiate her straight, slender whiskers like threads of silver. For a moment, my courage begins to fail before this danger, though no doubt it would have risen in the mouth of a cannon charged with shell, but like a bold thought suddenly brings daylight to my soul, and like men driven to bay who defy death and offer their body to the smiter, so I, seeing in this merely a tragic episode, resolve to play my part with honor till the last, and so I wait. Bravely. The awakening of my enemy. I was 22 years old. Sun appears. The leopard opens her eyes, puts out her paws with energy, yawns, showing the formidable apparatus of her teeth, and turns toward me and looks at me. The rigidity of her metallic gaze makes me shudder. She stands up, walks toward me. I let her come quite close. She sniffs at the air between us, then with a movement both gentle and amorous, I pass my hand over her body from the head to the tail, scratching the flexible vertebrae which divide the leopard's yellow back. Her eyes grow gentle, and when for the third time I accomplish this interesting flattery, she gives forth one of those purrings by which cats express their pleasure, only this murmur issues from a throat so powerful and so deep that it resounds through the cave like the last vibrations of an organ in a church. She rubs herself against my legs, putting up her back after the manner of all the race of cats, and then she gives vent to that wild cry which naturalists compare to the grating of a saw. I'm bold enough to play with her ears, caress her belly, and scratch her head as hard as I can. Tickle her skull with the point of my dagger, watching for the right moment to stab her when it occurs to me that to kill this savage princess with a single blow, I must poniard her in the throat. So I raise my blade to take my aim, and the leopard, satisfied no doubt, lays herself gracefully at my feet and casts up at me a glance in which is measured mingled a kind of goodwill. I put up my blade and eat my dates, leaning against one of the palm trees, casting my eyes alternately on the desert, in quest of some liberator, and upon my terrible companion to watch her uncertain clemency. Finishing my breakfast, I try if I might walk up and down, and the leopard leaves me free, contenting herself with following me with her eyes. So I walk on to the spring, where I find the remains of my horse. She has dragged the carcass all that way. About 2/3 of it had been devoured. The sight emboldens me to tempt the future, and I conceive the wild hope of continuing on good terms with the leopard for the entire day. I returned to her, and she played with me like a dog with its master, allowing herself to be rolled over, knocked about, and stroked alternately, sometimes provoking me, putting up her paws in a soliciting gesture. She let me do whatever I like, and when I began to stroke the fine hairs on her feet, she drew in her claws carefully. I was reminded of my first sweetheart, whom I had nicknamed Mignon by way of contrast, for she was so atrociously jealous that during all the time of our love I lived in fear of the knife. I can conceive the idea of getting this leopard to answer to this name. So towards the end of the day, she got into the habit of looking up at me whenever I cried Mignon. The setting of the sun, she gave several times running a profound melancholy cry. Oh, she's been well brought up. She says her prayers. Come, ma petit blond, I will let you go to bed first, counting on the activity of my legs to run away directly she is asleep and seek another shelter for the night. I await the hour of my flight, and when it arrives, I walk vigorously in the direction of the Nile. Hardly have I made a quarter of a league when I hear the leopard bounding after me, crying with that soul-like cry. And then immediately I fall into one of those movable quicksands from which it is impossible to save oneself. I give one cry of alarm, and the cat, seizing me with her teeth by the collar and pulling backwards, draws me as if by magic out of the whirling sands. Oh, my dear Mignon, we are bound together through life and death. No jokes, mind. The desert now seems inhabited. It contains a being to whom I can speak, and whose ferocity has been rendered gentle by me. Secure in this godlike confidence, at last I sleep. When I wake, she's nowhere to be found. Climbing the top of a hill, I see her in the distance, bounding towards me. She arrives, her muzzle smeared with blood. Oh, you're a nice girl, aren't you? You've been eating some poor Arab or other, have you? Well, don't you take to eating Frenchmen, or I shan't like you any longer. I think some weeks pass in this blissful manner. The leopard feeding elsewhere and I subsisting and feasting on the dates and whatever small game I can take from my gun, with my gun from around the spring. The companionship permits me to appreciate the sublime beauty of the desert. And solitude reveals to me all her secrets. I discover in the rising and the setting of the sun sights unknown in my world. I study the effects of the moon upon the ocean of sand, while the wind makes waves, swift of movement and rapid in their change. I live the life of the Eastern day, marveling at its wonderful pomp, and then having reveled at the sight of a hurricane over the plain, where the whirling sands make red, dry mists poisonous to all who breathe. I welcome the night with joy, for then falls the healthful freshness of the stars, and I listen to the imaginary music of the skies. Solitude teaches me to unroll the treasure of dreams. And I spend whole days remembering nothing. Am I insane? I don't think so. I grow passionately fond of the leopard, whether it is my will that modifies the character of my companion, or whether because she finds abundant food in the desert she respects my life, I do not know. But what I do know is that I begin to lose the taste of fear. I fear no longer. Imagine in this most dangerous predicament I lose the taste of fear. Why? I study the cat, the inflection of her voice, the expression of her eye, the line of her body, the pose of her head. She seems to me expressive of every human feeling I can imagine. But attentive only to me as we play in the sand, and with no notion of me, no doubt, as she chases down her prey or drinks from the spring. Present only in the instant. With no notion of mortality. And as slowly my memory of mankind fades and seems more trivial, more and more, that part which sleeps in all of us awakes in me, and the vastness of the desert and time no longer oppress me. This great emptiness opens my life. Then one day in a bright midday sun, an enormous bird courses through the air, and I leave my companion to look at this new guest, and after a moment the deserted sultana growls deeply. Oh my goodness. I do believe she's jealous. The eagle disappears into the air, and I and the leopard look at one another. The coquette quivers, and when she feels her friend stroke her head, her eyes flash like lightning. And then she shuts them tight. She has a soul, I think. Looking at the stillness of this queen of the sands. Golden like them, white like them, solitary and burning like them. And then the day comes. I don't know if I hurt her, but she turns around as if enraged, and with her sharp teeth catches hold of my leg gently, I dare say, but I think she... Thinking suddenly, like the man I was, that she would devour me, I plunged my dagger into her throat. She rolls over, giving a cry that freezes my heart. And I see her dying, still looking at me with outrage. Since then, I've been in war. In Germany, Spain, Russia, France. Yes, I have certainly dragged this carcass around a great deal, but I never have I seen anything like the desert. Never. Yes, it's very, very beautiful. I'm not always regretting my palm trees and my leopard, but I should have to be a very melancholy person for that. But in the desert, you see, there's everything and there's nothing. It is God without mankind.